So a big thank you to start with to our first year acting students here at the Conservatorium, Sienna D'Arienzo, Rebecca Harland, Dylan Hodge and Alexander James. Please join me once again to thank you. And good afternoon everybody, it's so lovely to see so many people here and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you all. I can see a number of colleagues, including faculty and teaching staff and professional staff. And also doctoral candidates, students and friends. We're gathering here today on the beautiful lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people upon which the Queensland Conservatorium is situated. I'd like to extend our deepest respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues joining us here today, as well as all First Nations peoples. My name is Alexis Kallio and I'm Deputy Director for Research here at the Conservatorium, and it's my great pleasure to chair this talk and music event. Whereas many other academic disciplines are still working to reconcile the Cartesian dualism between the body and the mind, I think that musicians have long understood that our legs and arms and torsos are more than a vehicle to carry around our brains. Yet how we ought to cultivate the body and our bodily performances as musicians are aspects that are often neglected from both scholarship and practice, beyond the pursuit of technical excellence with unimpaired by injury. So to extend these understandings today, I'm joined by Queensland Conservatorium Lecturer in Music Theory and Composer, Dr. Tom Scrick. Yeah. PhD candidate Sunny Kim, who brings with her a wealth of intercultural experience as a composer, improviser, performer, and educator. And senior lecturer Steve Newcomb, pianist, composer, and arranger, and our current head of jazz and postgraduate studies. So each of our panelists will share a short insight into some of their thoughts and work. And our event will conclude with a short performance by one of our second-year clarinet students, Hinata Nishimura, bringing yet another perspective to the ways in which music is embodied and the body is musicked. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexis. My name's Tom. I'm going to talk to you today about a new work of mine that was only completed quite recently. It's titled So I Am Shouting, and it was commissioned for the Annam set by Annam and written specifically for a specific performer. Her name is Claire Weatherhead, violinist. It's just for a solo instrument. But before I really get into the talking, I'd like to just play you the music, if that's okay. I won't play you the whole piece. I don't want to play you too much today, but you'll hear a portion of it. Sorry, we're having an argument over the direction. One more.
Are you clicking?
Oh, one more. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So there's a few things that I hope you might have noticed about that performance by Claire. Firstly, the videography, what might be a little bit different in this case about similar productions is that I've become more and more involved with videography myself, and I see that I'm able to round off a composition by filming the performance myself, which is what I've done in this case. And that is important because there's an aspect of my own physicality which ends up in the production, which is my hand operation of the camera. You might notice that the camera was quite dynamic and perhaps even considered as a part of the performance. Other thing that you might notice is that Claire, we had a deliberate discussion about how this should look, and Claire chose what she should wear, and we veered away from black, actually, and it's something that we commonly do now. And the other thing that you might have noticed is that Claire had a high degree of input into the sound of the composition in terms of rhythm and tempo and pulse, and that is baked into the composition. These are all things that are coming together for me thanks to the work that I've already done in my PhD, where I develop a couple of terms. I think about an attribute space, which is the idiosyncrasies of the instrument, like a violin, but also that person and their relationship with their instrument, particularly what kind of person this is and how they relate to their instrument, and the environment that this is performed in. All of these things form what I call an attribute space, and that's part of a larger conception which I call the manifold composition. It was important for me during my PhD because I'm working across different media. But since my PhD, since completing my PhD, I've realised that these ideas about a manifold composition are encompassing, in an abstract way, a variety of different possibilities for a piece of music. And an attribute space, they are part of a discussion also about embodiment. Now, embodiment is now considered a philosophically valuable way of thinking of the world, is thinking in our bodies, doing things and knowing things in our bodies, and it's becoming quite an important discussion in music as well. You might also hear a term thrown around, som aesthetics, which is like embodied cognition, but considering aesthetics, specifically soma being the body. And you might notice that these things have become important for me in my composition. The filmography, in other words, the camera motion and the way the music looks. This is a really funny question that I ask my students very often. What does the music look like? And that is a little bit of a strange question at first because we tend to think of music as sound. But I'm becoming more and more conscious of the way that music is not just sound. In fact, I would go so far as to say that music is people, music is the environment, music is people's bodies, and it extends outwards. So a manifold composition for me, a composition which is the music, or to think of music as being more than just sound. Music could be the filmography, music could be the physicality, performance interpretation, performance presence. And that's the question, are all of these things part of a composition? This is where I'm trying to come up with an answer at the moment. So here is Camille Barry, who actually just walked in the door, and she's a violinist. The next question, I'll play a little bit of this music in a minute, but the next question is, why does thinking about things like this matter? And I think it is a very important part of the way that music is changing at the moment, particularly music inside the space of academy, and what is largely referred to outside academy as classical music. Now, I don't like using that term, but in point of fact, that's the way people speak about this now. The last few months I've read 3 books with questioning classical music and problems with classical music in the title of the book, so it's what people are calling it. One thing that I've discovered is that there's a lot of noise around the possibility that classical music is declining. But there's also books written about how this isn't the case. Well, actually, they're not written about that, but they argue the case with the vibrancy of classical music. So you actually have two different things going on at once, as far as I can tell, and the literature is very confusing. Not at the bottom of it yet. And there is the question of whether the supposed decline is a decline of the whole lot, which I'm less inclined to accept, or perhaps classical music declining is what people think of as classical music, the kind of the entrenched notions of classical music, the way it's branded and so on. Perhaps that's inclined in contrast to the way in which a new kind of thing is developing, still with the same instruments, the same performers, but new in its own way. So classical music was versus classical music could be, and I raise that because this is still conflated in the literature, I think. So I won't talk for much longer because I actually prefer to play you my music. We've got these interrelated modalities of change, which is something that I'm identifying, economic concerns about that side of things. What I'm calling naturalistic, which is that there's some authors which are remarking on the need for change, on the impetus for change, but there are also other authors who are speaking about how things are changing, like regardless of what we should do or what we ought to do, things are actually changing under their own steam. And there is, of course, the social justice side of this, and also like Anna Bull, who has written a book about the really troublesome aspects of our tradition, which we love and we partake in, but intrinsically it has these major problems. So there's different ways in which you can unpack the question about change. I'm going to leave it at that, except to say that I think that the intrinsic change happens with rethinking our own roles, and certainly I am attempting to rethink my own role as a composer, what it means to be a composer. And for me, it could be different things for different people, but for me, this means starting with what I can manage, starting with what I can do myself, and reconsidering the ways in which I regard music and a musical composition. And for me now, this includes embodiment, which implicates my own relationship with the performer, especially in aspects of the production, the filming, where I am responding directly to the performer's bodily motion. And this is intrinsic to the final production. So I'll play you a little bit more. It should be queued up, but we won't play all the way through Alexis because it'll go for too long. So I'll tell you when to cut it off. This is Camille Barry and Kelly Green, both here today, actually. Thank you. Clicker.
Thank you so much, Tom, for sharing your beautiful music and your songs.
Thank you.
My name is Sunny Kim. I'm really happy to be here to share with you what's going on with my PhD project named Mother Tongue, Motherland. Humanity in its recent history has experienced collective traumas through catastrophic events such as wars, colonization, natural disasters, genocides, and terrorist attacks. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has introduced a new scale of collective trauma, simultaneously affecting the health, economy, and mental well-being of communities and nations globally. Mother Tongue, Motherland was conceived during a long lockdown in 2021. With the international borders closed, many Australians were separated from their families. Tens of thousands were stranded overseas, and millions with family ties abroad longed to see their loved ones. I was separated from my family in Korea, and it became especially difficult for me to be away when my father fell ill in April 2020, then passed away in February 2021. Like millions of others in Australia, my pandemic was not only one of coping with a severe sense of isolation, but also of enduring a deep longing for my loved ones. It especially pained me to be so far away from my mother as she grieved her loss. In December 2021, my collaborators in Mother Tongue, Motherland, Mindy Mangwang, Gala Rapport, Aviva Endrin, and Helen Svoboda, and I gathered on the land of Gonai Kurnai people on Mount Hotham, Victoria, in a 4-day creative development with the intention to create together a new body of musical work that addressed the feeling of alienation and longing experienced by migrant individuals, families, and communities, heightened during the pandemic. As the facilitator of this collaboration, my aim was to experiment with a new collaborative music-making process that was designed to provide a safe space for personal and collective experiences of recovering interpersonal relationships post-pandemic. Prior to this gathering, I asked my collaborators to interview their mothers regarding their experience of migration and motherhood. All of our mothers were born in places outside of Australia: South Korea, Iran, China, Finland, and the Netherlands. And the memories of migration had run through our families. The recordings of interviews were shared, and the family stories told through the interviews were to form the basis for the new music. To prepare the group for the story sharing sessions, I ran a few group activities with my collaborators. Today, I will share with you 2 embodied listening exercises that I ran with the group. The first exercise was a group meditation through which I verbally guided the group to listen to or feel their inner bodily sensations. I guided them to focus on a series of specific body parts, including the inner organs such as the lungs, the heart, and the digestive system. As they focused on a specific body part, they were to become conscious of their breathing patterns and use the out-breath to relax the body part. This was essential as this mindful inward listening was to be required in the story sharing sessions. I asked that everyone practice this embodied listening while listening to the stories told by our mothers. That instead of interrupting or offering comment that suggested solutions to the existing problems in the stories, they were to write down on sticky notes parts of the stories that they felt strong inner sensations for. The second activity was a listening exercise that involved movement which I developed based on my martial arts training. Paired in groups of 2, participants would stand facing their partners with both arms in front of their bodies and in contact with the arms of their partners. One person would lead the arm movements, and the others would follow by trying at all times to keep their arms in contact with their partners while having their eyes closed. After about 5 minutes, they would swap roles. Then the same exercise would be done with another partner until everyone's done the exercise with all other participants. Participants were guided to stand grounded and breathe deeply through this activity. This exercise in particular received feedback from the participants that they felt very relaxed through the activity and that it helped them to feel comfortable with the members of the group that they had never worked with before. This leading-following role also formed the framework for the musical improvisation that followed each story-sharing session. The musical improvisations were to provide the opportunity for the story sharer to further process and express the feelings that are too difficult to articulate with words. The story sharer would lead the improvisation while others followed, attuned to, responded, and supported the expressions. In the story sharing sessions, we listened to the recorded voices of our mothers as they generously shared their stories of resilience, love, sorrow, and wisdom in their own mother tongue. The story sharer would translate, add background information, or offer their own perspective to the various stories told by her mother. While some stories evoke joyful emotions, many stories recall the painful memories. Listening to each other's stories over the 4 days of creative development, we shed many tears together, but also shared many laughs. As we shared stories and sounds, we could feel our bodies and hearts become lighter with a deep sense of relief. We could also see our minds growing wiser and stronger together as we helped each other to process our feelings and reflect on our own lives through sharing of our mother's life stories. In his book, The Body Keeps the Score, Mind, Brain, and the Body in the Transformation of Trauma, Bessel van der Kolk discusses the importance of reciprocity, which he describes as being truly heard and seen by the people around us, feeling that we are held in someone else's mind and heart. He posits that being able to feel safe with other people is the single most important aspect of mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. Numerous studies of disaster response around the globe have shown that social support is the most powerful protection against becoming overwhelmed by stress and trauma. For our physiology to calm down, heal, and grow, we need a visceral feeling of safety. Through facilitating this collaboration and exploring the practice of embodied listening as a group, I believe that I gained an invaluable experience and knowledge of the potentials of the impact that collaborative music-making process can have on recovering interpersonal relationships. To wrap up my presentation, I'd like to perform for you a short musical excerpt from this work.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. A huge thanks to Alexis and Kallio for the invitation, and also for Tom and Sunny to engage in these discussions about your work and to share ideas. In a moment, I'll play the world premiere of a very short snippet of a film. I'll call it a film because it feels nice to say that I've been in a film. But it's basically a music video. Maybe it's a short film, maybe it's a music video, I'm not quite sure. But the story of this particular activity in my creative work began as a composition for piano. It involved lyrics that I wrote. It expanded to a recording for a chamber ensemble, which I did in New York in 2016. And then I brought it back to Australia. I've been sitting up for quite a long time, but I ran into a filmmaker, Vanessa Van Dalsen, who's a local in Brisbane, and floated the idea of collaborating. I've always really loved collaborating with different people, whether it's dance artists or lyricists or poets. And I sort of had no idea how this might go, but I sent her the track and said, let's have a read and see what you think about it. And our very first meeting, she came back with a storyboard all written out, about 5 pages long. You know, storyboards where they have little boxes and drawings and things like that. It was so detailed. And I was completely blown away, for her energy to put towards it, but that she kind of captured some essence of it just from hearing the music live. And I hadn't actually put the vocal track with the lyrics on it at that point, so she had really no understanding of what it was about. But she kind of created a world for it. So then I said, okay, I'll send you the actual audio track with the lyrics, and hoping that it still match. Said that, and it did go through some variations. The first idea was, oh, we'll get some actors. And then so that sort of slowly evolved to, actually, Steve, I think you should act in it. And so that was a bit of a surprise, because I never thought that was something I'd be interested in doing. But it just turns out when you're on a shoestring budget, it's the best thing to do. So Vanessa then engaged Janine Dyer, who's another wonderful local filmmaker, and he's also a jazz pianist, as it would happen. So it's really fascinating to sort of go through this conversation with what Tom's looking at in terms of a musician behind the camera, and what his sort of collaborative process as an improvising pianist and now a filmmaker. So it really opened up my mind in terms of how all these things are really the same and what we can gain from them all. But back to the film, I guess in the acting sense, it involves embodiment in a way that I have to move my body. You know, I'm not sort of sitting at the piano anymore, looking at notes and the fingers themselves sort of dictating what's happening just in a sonic way. But now I have to sort of move my body in ways that I've never even thought I would have to think about. So luckily, at the Conservatorium here, we have the wonderful Karen Sharp, who's on faculty, and she's sort of explored acting and music through her own practice. I think her PhD, looking at performers' approaches to music. So I had a good conversation with Karen to discuss, like, how do you do it? how do you do acting? Give us a very short solution. But in essence, what boiled down from Karen's feedback was the audience want to know it's believable. So you've got to believe it yourself. You have to be completely inhabiting that character. You're really going into your own emotional thing, and you're inhabiting that character, and you have to hold on to it. You can't break it. So okay. So that was really the only training that I brought to the situation. But I think my reflection of what happened through the process is that I took on the song is called Pluto and the Sun, and I took on the Pluto character, and I think over those 3 days I really did start to become Pluto, and then even after it, I went through that experience of, like, you know, leaving Pluto behind and like, oh, now it's someone else. And so the strangest thing for me looking at the video now is that I look at this character and it doesn't look like me. And maybe this is something that actors all sort of go through. And my reflection has come back to, like, as a musician, I don't think I've had that same feeling. I think as a musician, I've always tried to be myself. It's like you're always working to be, you know, the truest version of yourself you can be. But in this other sense, it's putting out a totally different persona on whatever the requirement might be in that situation. So, without further ado, this is a short snippet of Pluto and the Sun. It's by my debut acting. This is the first time it's been seen. The release is for the scene will happen in December with a nice little buzz and lead up to that. So.
Day or night, there's no difference in this life. Floating like a chunk of ice, ready to be melted. Night or day, every sound wave sent my way blinds me like a wandering ray, gently to be no one sound into the view. As we know we try very to run around, we keep on spinning at least a while.
You know what happens. What happens to them? Yeah. So, yeah, it's very interesting that when I watch the film, I'm completely distracted. Like I don't hear the music at all. But I think that's the filmmakers being able to sort of bring that completely different, point of view and narrative. So a couple of things that I've been reflecting on in terms of embodiment and performing, and I guess my main activity is a jazz piano player. And a couple of key experiences from my life have come back up in terms of these ideas of how I move the body, how I train moving the body, how I might engage with students in understanding moving the body and playing jazz music. And one of them is when I was a teenager, I was in a band that was booked to play for a dance, and it was like a ballroom kind of dancing thing. And a lot of the dancers were saying, okay, you need to play foxtrot, you need to play all these different kinds of specific tempos and styles. And as a young bunch of jazz players, we had no concept of what that was, and we didn't really do it very well. And so we didn't get the gig back. We basically lost the gig. And at the time, I thought, well, that's old stuff, I don't want to do that. But the second related idea is when I was learning to play jazz, and I guess from a technical level, I was looking at the piano, playing bebop, and playing the right chords and everything. And my very first lesson with Kenny Barron in New York, I sat next to him, he's there on the piano, and then I just heard him play bebop and saw him play bebop, and just watched his body and the way things moved, and it was just like, it just exploded my brain, because and the way I was playing at the time was kind of, I suppose, I hadn't seen it in person before. I've had it from recordings, and so it set me on this journey of like understanding like how he is moving to play when he plays. So it's something I've always continued to work on. And like Tom, you were reflecting on, I think we are in a different era now where we see a lot more with our eyes on things that are available on the web and the like. So I think we are sort of all the time engaged with looking at things as much as listening to them. The other experience from my life was when I saw Dale Barlow, a wonderful tenor saxophone player, performer, and then straight after his set, there was I guess a dance party, and I saw Valbrala get up and dance, and he was dancing on the stage, and I thought, wow, he dances really good. And so that was another impactful event that I guess made me think about these interrelations and how important. So it's something when I played Latin music years later, I didn't mind trying to have a dance as well and trying to understand the feeling of music from that side of things. And sometimes in my ensembles, if players are here that would recall, we might get up and move around a bit and dance if we're looking at swing and the way it feels. So I think this is some of these things are going on in my head in terms of not just dealing with the notes and sort of moving beyond that into other collaborative and embodiment exercises. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. We do have time for some discussion and some questions. So you can ask a question to the panel in general or individual researchers. But while you're thinking of your question, I just wanted to pick up on one thing that I think went through all of them, which is this collaboration, right? And also the sense of trust and safety, as Sunny brought up. And I found it quite interesting in listening to these processes that each of you have engaged in. This is not something that happens by accident. And watching some of your videos, Sunny, that's one way I think that we can learn and practice and develop this sense of trust with others who do completely different jobs with different expertise and different skill sets that we will probably never understand. That's probably for the best. But to bring all these professionals together in a way so you can, it's something that can be learned, I suppose, and something that we can develop within our own musicianship and researcher skills as well. I just wonder if any of, maybe Tom or Steve want to talk a little bit more about that process of coming together with other.
Well, I think the things that you're mentioning, they're coming through in the literature now. I'll have to look at my notes, I can't remember the book, but there's a book written specifically about classical music, which emphasises that in the opinion of the authors, the dire need to re-engage with community, and in a broad sense, meaning your other performers, but also the audience as well. And that, not for any other reason in an academic sense, except that it's a skill, like it is a skill that you need to learn. And I think that's one that has been really, could be more in the foreground. And the other thing about it is that it's not at all accidental. I mean, we do all sorts of things which are accidental, but we need to non-accidentally start thinking about the ways we can grow our notions of the music that we're involved with, especially if it's like me and we're involved with processes and institutions and historical ways of thinking about music which are on the cusp of change, whether we like it or not, or in the process of change. So we have to non-accidentally conceive of a way forward in amongst that.
Yeah, I was reflecting on Joni Mitchell, wonderful Joni Mitchell. I think she's an artist who would write poetry and do some painting and then write songs and then sing and play guitar. And she kind of like go through each of those different things, and someone asked her, why do you do that? And so, well, one kind of runs up, one runs out of energy, runs out of steam, and just stops. So I go to the next one for a while and dip into that well. So I think on that sense, there's a sense of, like there's so much to be gained by exploring or engaging in other communities and from those fields.
I think who our audiences are also changing.
Yep.
It's not so, we can't sort of rely on those assumptions, and that's what performance is.
Yeah. The audience needs, in many different ways, the audience needs to become part of the process. I mean, all this stuff about embodiment and so much that it's the artwork is the experience, according to some philosophers. The artwork is the experience, the aesthetics is the experience. So with that in mind, the audience becomes absolutely central to the experience. Which I only raise because there is, historically, in the realm of art, there's literature which literally says we don't care about the audience, we've got to push them away, push them back. And I mean, some people have said that overtly, but if it's not overt, then it's implicit on occasions. And Anna Gould has written about this, the black uniform that we wear, and this dichotomy between sitting still and paying attention and keeping everything under control, and this urgent need to get halfway through a passage on the cello and we've got to keep going, and the conductor says, "Stop, we've got to rehearse that." And so it's intrinsic to what it is, but we also need to think of new ways of, maybe from the inside out, working our hands on. So.
No, I can really relate to the discussion that, or the thought that there's a need for us to reconnect with our bodies as music makers and also an audience as a listener, because we live in such a disembodied world. We travel so far without being anywhere, and it's a really positive thing. But what a performance, in-person performance, can do, it can be never replaced. And I always sort of intuitively knew that when I engage in improvisation as an improviser, I'm involving the whole body as a listening organ. And I'm not listening only to the audible, I'm listening to the inaudible with my body.
Yeah, beautiful, that listening to the inaudible.
And I've discovered that neuroscientists call this mirror neuron system, that we all of us have inbuilt system that by seeing somebody do something or make something, it's the same part of the brain that is activated activates in us. So we're and which means all of the emotions that are going on, the visual experience somebody's having, we can also have access to it. Yeah.
That's quite phenomenal when you start to actually think about what that means. Do we have any questions from the audience? You'll have to raise your hand and raise your voice. Glenn.
Thanks, guys. Firstly, it's amazing. I love the thread in between different people's perception of research and how it comes out in conversation. I got that word sonic waves, or essentially evolution, as a sense of going past that what is auditory only for listening, but as you say, that internal dialogue. So my question is, what do you tell your younger self about where you are now as compared to where you were in relation to your own sonic journey?
You go.
Take some dance classes.
Yeah, I love that. I find it very, very frustrating that I can't dance well as a musician. It's a huge black spot in my, I need to be able to do that. And I'm lucky, and I heard that you do some martial arts. What kind of martial arts?
Wing Chun.
Wing Chun, okay, that's interesting, because I do Kung Fu.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. And I had this conversation with you, Glenn, actually. This has been really enlivening for me, getting to know my body through a martial art, where I should have been doing dancing, but I never did. And so this has sort of served the purpose for me.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, coming from that to where I am now.
I think the idea of embodiment is also interesting in terms of dance. Who's to say what dancing well is?
That's true.
And does dancing well necessarily mean that you're in your body? And doing this embodied being or arting, whatever it might be. So when you say dance classes, I'm not.
Yeah, it's only part of the story. It's only, I guess it's the awareness of it. The awareness of embodiment, what it pains and influencing on things.
one thing that really had a very big impact for me was learning about this practice called contouring, which a phenomenal jazz drummer, Bob Moses, made. And I was studying with him, and he had me do this contouring exercise every time I went to his studio. And it was the most embarrassing thing that I'd ever done in front of anybody, because he would put on music, and I'd have to like express all the rhythmic parts that are going on in the music. And it could be just simple as a solo thing, but it could be like 9-piece band. So like, how do I do that? But Bob said, if you work on this, you can play with anybody. Anybody from anywhere in the world. Because you're training your body to be in tune so intimately with somebody. And it's not just, he also emphasized, it's not just the movements that you're attuning to, it's actually the whole psychological thing. Yeah. Psychological ecology that's embedded in the sound.
Sense of freedom.
Sense of freedom, or maybe it's a sad sound, maybe it's a cultural thing that we don't even know how to think about, but we can feel it.
Yeah.
The body can we can know it with our bodies.
It's I think it's related to what you were saying, Alexis, too. I think you know, even just the way this process helps you get beyond your inhibitions, like even using the camera. When I started operating a camera, I was inhibited. I didn't realise this at the time, but I was inhibited in my motion, and that's got to do with the general kind of like this kind of embarrassment I have about moving my body around in space, in spite of being a musician, in spite of having musical training, and that I had to sort of let myself free up in a way before I could even operate a camera well. So I think it has implications, and as you say, it's got nothing to do with being an expert dancer. It's just learning to inhabit things a bit more. Yeah.
Maybe I have time for one more short question. Bernard?
Just to say wonderful, thank you all. And just the point of being between audience and performers, arguably the filmmakers in that position in a sort of funny way. But I just wanted to share something I happened to come across that resonates so closely before you discussed it before. It's from David Bowie in 1999 on a Panorama program, and he said the grey space in the middle between performer and audience is going to be what the 21st century will be about. It's an incredibly powerful interview. I've never seen it till this week, but it's, as I say, Panorama on David Bowie. It aligns with what all three of you are talking about as well. And just says that's where we're going. He also said the internet. He also said then that the internet might have some role to play.
Yeah.
He was disputed by the interviewer at the time. But he got that one right, so maybe he's got this one right as well. So just to share. But thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here, and I'd like to express a very big thanks to our panelists, Tom, Sunny, and Steve. I think it's been a really fascinating discussion and insight into aspects of your work that may not be quite so, funnily enough, visible, even as part of your daily work here at the Commons. So thank you very, very much. And just to end, I would like to invite Hinata Nishimura, one of our second year clarinet students.
Hello, I'm Hinata, and this is my clarinet. My grandmother, who is a shamisen teacher, has been teaching me since I was 10 years old. And today I'll be playing two short folk tunes. One called Nosabushi, which is from Miyazaki Prefecture, where me and my grandmother is from, and another one, Sotanobushi from Miyagi Prefecture. Thank you.